I never imagined my life would split so cleanly into before and after. But looking back now, the signs were there, quiet and deliberate. I was married into comfort, not passion. My husband was kind in a practiced way, attentive when it was convenient, distant when it mattered most. We lived together like partners managing a routine, not lovers sharing a pulse. I told myself that stability was enough, that wanting more was childish. That lie kept me calm for a long time. Then there was her. She entered my life as someone I was supposed to trust without question. She smiled easily, spoke softly, and listened in a way that made people feel seen. When she was around, conversations flowed better. Laughter lingered longer. I didn't feel threatened at first. I felt relieved. It was nice having someone else fill the silence my husband and I had stopped noticing. What I didn't understand then was that silence had been an invitation. Small things began to shift. Glances lasted a second too long. Messages were deleted by accident. Plans were made without including me, then explained away with excuses that sounded rehearsed. I noticed how they shared private jokes I wasn't part of, how their energy changed when I entered the room. I asked myself if I was imagining it, if insecurity was making me paranoid. I chose denial because it was easier than confrontation. One evening, a moment cracked that illusion. Nothing dramatic, no raised voices or confessions. Just a look they exchanged when they thought I wasn't watching. It wasn't guilt I saw. It was certainty. That was the night I understood this wasn't impulsive or accidental. Whatever was happening had intention behind it. They weren't stumbling into betrayal. They were walking toward it together. I felt foolish for not seeing it sooner. But more than that, I felt strangely calm. There was pain, yes, sharp and heavy, but also clarity. For the first time in years, I stopped blaming myself for the emptiness in my marriage. I realized I hadn't failed to keep his attention. He had already chosen to give it elsewhere. And she hadn't taken anything that was truly mine. What they were planning only exposed what was already broken. I watched more carefully after that. I listened without reacting. I learned how deep it went, how long they had been testing boundaries, convincing themselves it was harmless. They thought they were clever. They thought I was unaware. What they didn't know was that with every secret shared between them, something inside me was waking up. I began to imagine a life beyond the one I was clinging to. Not revenge, not drama, just freedom. The idea scared me, but it also gave me strength. I stopped trying to fix what didn't want to be fixed. I stopped begging for attention that was already promised elsewhere. Instead, I observed, waited, and prepared myself emotionally for the truth I knew would surface. When everything finally came out, it wouldn't be a shock to me. It would be confirmation. And as strange as it sounds, part of me was grateful. Grateful that they planned it so carefully, because their certainty forced me to confront my own. That night, as I lay awake beside a man who no longer felt like mine, I realized this betrayal might not destroy me. It might be the reason I finally choose myself. The next day, I couldn't shake the memory of his request, of the way he had looked at me, the vulnerability in his eyes that stirred something forbidden inside me. When he returned, I noticed the subtle shifts, the way he hesitated before speaking, the way his gaze lingered longer than necessary. Every movement, every word felt weighted, layered with an unspoken intimacy that made my pulse quicken. I told myself it was just closeness, just the natural result of helping someone you care about. But the truth was undeniable. The boundaries we had once taken for granted were already fraying as I assisted him. I found myself drawn into moments that felt dangerous and thrilling. A hand brushing against mine while reaching for a book. A lingering touch on his shoulder as I guided him through instructions. Small gestures that seemed innocent yet carried an electric charge. Each time I felt a mix of excitement and guilt. Aware of the line I was skirting. Aware that even a glance could ignite something uncontrollable. I couldn't stop analyzing every detail. The shift in his tone, the subtle warmth in his smile, the way he seemed to lean closer without realizing it. My mind was a battlefield torn between desire and reason, between what I should do and what I secretly wanted. He began opening up more, sharing thoughts and feelings he had never revealed before. I listened, careful with my words, yet I couldn't deny that my own reactions had changed. My guidance carried a softness and intimacy, a tension I had never allowed before. I noticed the way his eyes followed me, the subtle expressions that hinted at curiosity and longing. It was intoxicating, dangerous, and impossible to ignore. Each session left me drained yet elated, aware that we were entering territory I shouldn't explore, yet unable to resist the pull to be. By the end of the day, the air between us had shifted entirely. There was a charged silence as he lingered, a hand accidentally brushing mine, a whisper of a thank you that seemed to carry meaning far beyond words. I felt a thrill that frightened me, a heat that pulsed through me, and I realized that the line we were dancing along had already been crossed silently. I was no longer just a guide, a helper. I had become something more, someone entangled in a web of desire and secrecy. And the dangerous truth that settled in my chest was this: the first step had been taken, and there was no turning back from the attraction that simmered between us, invisible to the world but undeniable to us both. The moment he left, the room felt emptier, charged with the echoes of what had passed. I knew that every interaction from now on carried risk, that every glance or touch could deepen what had begun, and that our relationship had been transformed forever. And yet, despite the guilt and fear, part of me longed for the next encounter, for the forbidden closeness that promised more than I was willing, or able, to admit. The line was broken, subtly, silently, and the tension between us had become an unspoken force that neither of us could resist. After the initial moments of closeness, everything became sharper, more intense. Each time he came to me for help, the air between us seemed to thicken, charged with something neither of us could name aloud. I noticed the way he lingered near me, his body slightly closer than necessary, his hand brushing mine in ways that felt deliberate yet unspoken. I told myself it was instinct, habit, or gratitude, but my chest tightened and my thoughts raced in ways that betrayed the truth. The attraction was growing, subtle but undeniable, and I could feel it pulling me into a territory I had always known was forbidden. Our conversations changed. He began sharing personal thoughts, confessions that exposed vulnerability I hadn't seen before. And I responded differently than I should have. More softly, more attentively, with a warmth that went beyond simple guidance. I found myself leaning closer, lingering in moments when a quick response would have sufficed. My words carried an intimacy I could barely control, and every glance seemed to carry meaning heavier than mere concern. It was intoxicating, this unspoken tension, this dangerous connection that made every interaction feel loaded with possibility. Small gestures became impossible to ignore. A hand resting briefly on mine as I guided him, a shoulder brushing against mine while we worked side by side, a quiet laugh that seemed meant for my ears alone. Each moment sent shivers through me, leaving my mind tangled with guilt and desire. I caught myself imagining more, thinking about what it would feel like to give in to the tension, to allow the closeness we were skirting to become physical, even though I knew the consequences could be catastrophic. Yet the thought was irresistible, a dangerous pull I couldn't deny. By midweek, the energy between us had transformed completely. There were fleeting touches, shared glances that lingered too long, words that carried double meaning without either of us acknowledging it. I realized that our relationship had shifted from guidance to something more personal, more intimate, and far riskier than I had ever anticipated. Each encounter left me restless, thinking about him long after he left, feeling the weight of what had begun and the thrill of the danger it carried. I knew that every interaction was a step further into a territory from which there might be no return. That day, as he prepared to leave, a simple brush of our hands, a shared look, a quiet thank you felt electric. I felt my pulse racing, my thoughts spiraling, aware that the line between us had been crossed again. Subtly yet undeniably, the forbidden connection pulsed between us like an invisible thread, impossible to ignore. And though I feared the consequences, I couldn't stop thinking about the next time, about the closeness that awaited, and about the dangerous, thrilling path we had begun walking together. One that would forever change how I saw him and myself. The following encounter carried a weight I couldn't ignore. The subtle tension between us had become a constant presence, lingering in every glance, every gesture, every word. I tried to maintain professionalism, to focus on the task at hand, but it was impossible. Every small touch, every brief brush of hands, every hesitant movement seemed amplified, charged with an unspoken meaning that neither of us dared voice. The room felt smaller, the air heavier, and my mind raced with a mix of desire, guilt, and anticipation that left me trembling quietly inside. He looked at me in a way that made me acutely aware of the forbidden nature of what had begun. His eyes lingered, searching, curious, almost pleading, and I felt a rush of warmth I couldn't deny. Every instinct screamed caution, yet every part of me was drawn to the dangerous intimacy between us. I knew the line had already been crossed in subtle, silent ways, and now the truth of our connection pressed on me like an unrelenting weight. It was thrilling, intoxicating, and terrifying all at once, a force I had no control over and no desire to resist entirely. As I guided him through what he needed, I noticed the small signs. A hand staying a moment too long, a shiver in his voice, a hesitation that carried meaning far beyond words. I responded in kind, my own gestures carrying a softness, a closeness, an intimacy I should have denied. The boundaries that had once seemed clear were now blurred, almost meaningless, as we danced silently around the tension neither of us could acknowledge openly. The forbidden nature of our connection made every moment feel urgent, every glance electric, every whispered word weighted with possibility. By the end of the encounter, the silence between us said more than words ever could. A lingering touch, a shared breath, a quiet thank you, filled the space with unspoken understanding. I realized then that we had passed a threshold from which there was no return. The intimacy, the attraction, the desire had grown beyond subtlety into something undeniable. I felt exhilaration and guilt at the same time, a strange mixture that left me shaken yet craving more. I knew that whatever came next, whether discovery, confrontation, or continued secrecy, our relationship had been transformed forever. As he left, the echo of his presence stayed with me. The room felt emptier, yet the memory of our closeness burned in my chest. I understood the risks, the consequences, and the danger of what had begun, but I also understood the thrill, the allure, and the undeniable connection that had woven itself between us. We had crossed invisible lines, and there was no going back. The choice to say yes had set us on a path of secrecy, desire, and forbidden intimacy that would haunt and excite me long after the door closed. And though I feared the repercussions, part of me secretly longed for the next encounter, the next moment, the next brush against the boundaries we had already shattered.